I still love the original OP-1. And I think it's a great time if you're interested in picking one up because there are a lot of price drops with the Field having just come out. And it's still a perfectly capable and fully featured amazing instrument. If you've been following me for a bit, you'll know that I haven't really been using it a ton recently, but I wanted to change that. So I wiped it clean and started a project from scratch with only a few piano samples loaded up on top of the factory presets. And I just set out to make a really simple loop with it in order to kind of remind myself why I really like it in the first place. So I'm going to play through that jam for you and then explain how I kind of layered the sounds to just put this little piece together. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this guy too. All right, so let's get into it. Yeah, so just a neat little kind of off-kilter lo-fi hip-hop piano groove. Pretty quirky, kind of hi-fi lo-fi, which I think the OP-1 excels really strongly at. And I'm just going to get into some of the settings that I've used to kind of achieve that sound really quickly. Here are my drive and release settings. I think that you can get some really crisp sounds on the OP-1 with settings like these, even when you're kind of overloading the internal drive. It has a really unique internal saturation character that you might love or you might hate, but I really like it and I think it kind of works well with how the onboard mic and input kind of processes sound anyway. So I really like to stick around this sort of area and kind of push it. And let's listen to the drum track and adjust some of these settings. So like that's kind of the default setting, right? The release is set pretty high. And with no drive at all, it's like that. So I, again, like to push it, and it gives that kick a pretty heavy transient. It doesn't sound great on its own, but when you bring in everything else, I think it adds some nice texture there. So let's go on to a beat breakdown. Let's start with a start, and hopefully as I kind of talk through this, it could give you some ideas on how you might use an OP-1 if you're looking to get one, or some ideas on how to rekindle your love with the one that you have and might be neglecting, like I was doing. So this is the first track, pretty simple. I should have this set up. Yep, so I have a piano sample from the Bath Splice sample pack. And that's a sample. So I just did a little. And that's really all. And then I added a clap on this track. One thing that's important to do on the OP-1 is to spread out your percussion. And it makes it so you might not be able to build a loop in a traditional way, but I think it really enriches the stereo field. So you can see this is how I have my mix set up. And as we go through the different percussive elements that are on each track, you'll kind of hear how those different settings come into play in terms of stereo spread. So this is pretty centered a little bit to the right. And just keep that in mind as we go over the additional elements. So the next part that I bring in is this second track. And there's it with that first loop. So there are three elements that this second track is made up of. And as you can hear, it's panned pretty hard to the left. So the first element of this track I want to bring your attention to is the drum loop. And you can hear that it's kind of flanged, and we achieved this with the cow effect, which is this guy. And I can't remember which kit I used, but For example, I have the finger drum sequencer, and I kind of just cycled through some of these patterns. And I had the cow doing its thing. So you can hear that happening in the background on the left side, right? I also had this little bell hit that I just kind of sequenced in by itself after that initial beat. And as you can hear, the volume increases. So with the input, I literally did what I'm doing now. And just hit the key like that as I increase the volume. Pretty simple trick to kind of automate volume. You just record the automation directly in. That's something I really like with the OP-1 is having full control over that. Even though you kind of lose control after it's down to tape, it's, a more traditional tape-like workflow. What you put down is what you get, but you have the flexibility to adjust those parameters as you lay them down, which you don't really get in a typical sequencer format. And then the final element I have is that synth sound, which is the synth designer here. And then I sequenced it to the tombola. So it was doing that. And I just sidechained it again using that. You might hear as I'm doing that, you're getting some clicks and pops, some little crispy sounds. I find that doesn't really come through when I'm recording down a track. It's never been an issue for me. So if you're playing around with that, and you hear those pops, don't worry about it. Let's move on to, actually, let's jump to track 4 with, the main kick line. So this pattern is mixed dead center because it has the kick, and I wanted the kick to be in the center, as one typically does. And I used one of these two kicks, again, with that internal saturation, that drive turned up. It really just boosts the transient, which again, you might hate it, you might like it. It's all about taste. You don't have to do that, but I did it for this piece. So I did the same thing underneath that kick that I did for track 2. I have a very light, not super flanged, little loop playing underneath. Again, I don't remember which kit I used. I kind of just bounced around between the kits when I was doing this light background layered percussion, just to get some kind of like fuzzy cymbal sounds. And as you can see, this is one of the reasons I really do love the OP-1 is because it's super simple to use these creative sequencing tools to kind of just get stuff down. And the fact that I could just put those together in like one pass and have it set to the tempo without really thinking about it is super cool. It's a great idea generator, and it's easy to get relatively complicated things down pretty quickly. And lastly, let's go to track 3. As you can see, panned all the way to the right. And as you can hear, I did the same exact thing with that finger drum sequencer. On the right side, I just have a simple light pattern that's looped and sequenced from one of those kits. And then I used a preset synth, and guess how I did that? Same as track 2. Just some good old automated side chaining before the audio hits the tape track. So you can see they kind of pulse in the same meter. One of them is really soft and pad-like, and the other one's a little bit more gurgly and unpredictable, but they still have that same swelling rhythm. As you can also hear, the timing here isn't perfect, which is kind of another cool thing about the OP-1 is unless you want to use the sequencers all the time, which is really easy to do and not a problem at all. But if you don't want to do that, it forces you to kind of just lay down whatever you want to and play along with the metronome. This whole piece, the melody and the rhythm of this sample dictated the tempo of the whole thing. I tapped in the tempo and it's like not an actual whole number BPM, but it's fine because it's just a little jam, creative exercise. Doesn't really matter. No pressure. The last thing I want to bring your attention to is some of the performance tricks that I implemented. So we have a high pass filter here on 7. And then we have a maxed out reverb on 8. And I really like using that because it highlights some of the overtones that you hear in the percussion as it lets them ring out. It gives them a cool sort of harmonic reverb quality. You could sidechain that too. And because this is in 2, the meter is a little bit strange. It's fun to do like little drops at either 1 or 2. So for example, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And you can just play around with little tricks like that. So I did a few takes of this jam and just showed you the one that I thought sounded the coolest. And then, of course, I ran it through the microcosm because I've just been obsessed with it and playing with it on everything. So there are numerous tricks you can do with the microcosm, obviously, but I just tap in the tempo, which you might not be able to see on camera, and then max out the effect mix to kind of do like a little drop type of thing. And then you get cool shit like that. Play with the different settings. That's nice. Tap back in the tempo occasionally. Go to some of the rhythmic settings. Interrupt can be fun. All right, you get it. Anyway, so yeah, this little exercise has definitely rekindled my love for the OP-1 over the past couple of days. If you're interested, I have a bunch of other OP-1 and even microcosm content that you can check out for some ideas and inspiration. And if you really enjoyed it and are interested in supporting the channel in any way, you can head over to patreon.com/slowhaste. Check out some of the different tier options I've got there. And if you ever want to get in touch or chat about setting up lessons, best way to do so is via Instagram. I'm pretty active over there. You can see cool, stupid pictures of my dog and nature, along with hearing some snippets of my music. And that's just @slowhaste. Anyways, thanks y'all for stopping by, and I hope to see you next week. Peace.